under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Call this meeting, West Burlington City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Crowner.
Here.
Heitmeyer. Lees. Here. Young.
Here.
Need to perfect and approve the agenda.
So move.
Support.
The motion with support. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Lees.
Aye.
Young.
Aye.
Crowner.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consent agenda.
Motion to approve is presented.
Support.
There's a motion with support to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 10, which are a regular city council meeting on September 22nd, 2021. Approve a payment of Nesper sign advertising. Approve a payment to Ideal Ready Mix. Approve a payment to Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. Approve a payment to Municipal Supply. Approve a payment to Municipal Solutions. Approve a payment to HydroView Midwest. Approve payment to Felt Fire. Approve the clerk's monthly financial report for August 2021. And approve the claims list as presented in the amount of $87,266.98. Any discussion? Roll call.
Crowner.
Aye.
Lees.
Aye.
Young.
Aye.
Motion carried. Council and staff reports. Greg?
Just a couple things tonight, Your Honor. I have, most of my stuff's on the agenda. I think I put it in my last note or mentioned it to council. Tiff you'll probably start seeing that here in the next month or so. Tax abatement. I have one piece of information that I'm working on. I need to get to bond council, and then you should see those ordinances coming forward to council. Ryan Nagraki and company were successful in their tax credit application. We're going to meet next week. So that's great news for those market rate apartments, which the city indicated tax abatement would be where our match would come from. So we need to get that going as well. These C apartments, and you got an email tonight from the chamber. They're looking to do an informational session as there are a number of new candidates, but there are no seats that are up for, or competitive,
Contested.
I guess. Contested, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. We're going to submit a grant for pollinator seed, which is 100% funding. We've received one 50/50 grant as well, and I'm going to put some additional information together for you on that, but rough estimate, not including annual maintenance, is that by doing this and this one-time cost of roughly $9,300, not counting grant dollars, we'll be saving at least $9,600 or closer to $10,000 on an annual basis thereafter. So a one-time expense for an annual savings of roughly the same amount, or $10,000 a year. So I'll put those more detailed numbers together for you and get that out to you.
You want to have anything for Greg? Mike?
Just been working on sidewalk repair, street repair. You've probably seen us over on agency. We got that big valve in. We got 2 more valves over there that got to go in to finish up over there. So we'll be able to isolate things when we have problems. South lift demo has been going on this week. New floors in the pit. They're finishing up things, loosening the lid. They'll be ordering a new lid for the new lift station so we can get that set. I don't know how long it'll take to get the lid made, but things are moving along on that project again. Lures with the pavers and the grass, the park's still shut because just ain't getting the rain we need to get the grass to go. And when the kids were in there, they would hook in the fabric and pulling it up from the creek. So we're starting to green up now. Once we get a good root bed, we'll open that back up so the kids can get in there. Water tower, the welders moved in. The steel's been coming a load a day. They've been welding it up, and another load comes in. And if you haven't been out there, I think I gave Greg some pictures. The bottom is already up, and they're starting the side walls up today, going up. So they told me they would be here 25 to 30 days, and that tank would all be welded sitting there for the painters to come in and paint it. Then they'll raise it, weld the top on the bottom, and then the painters will come back and take care of that. So far, we're still on schedule, and hopefully before too cold of weather, we'll get that painted and get it up in the air. That's about all I got.
Anything for Mike?
Your Honor, just real quick, we probably should bring up the leaves.
I was gonna bring that up.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. I'll let you do that.
Is that what you were gonna bring up?
No, actually, I just wanted to tell you, I really like how those pavers look over on Lures. I've been over a couple times and walked it, and I think that really looks nice. I know you still got some things to clean up and finish, but
Yep.
yeah, the pavers make a big difference.
Just two things, Mike. Love all the sidewalk improvements around town. It seems like there's a lot of that have been
It's a
patched up and things. Looks good.
non-stop job.
It looks like it. A second thing, the Pat Klein bathroom work,
Yes.
how's that going?
I was gonna inform Teresa of that after the meeting.
Oh, okay.
The toilets are in, they are flushing, but the floor drains are plugged. So I got one open tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have the other floor drain fixed, because I need them in case somebody leaves me a mess. I gotta be able to wash the bathroom down, but we're down to one drain, and we'll be able to hand out a key when somebody wants to reserve the shelter house.
I thought I was gonna be the first one to flush. Hurt.
We've flushed them, nobody's used it. If you want to come over and be the first one to actually use it.
No, not particularly.
Okay.
Gotta bring your own toilet paper, there's a shortage.
I had some in the freezer
Yeah.
for homecoming.
Still got some.
Anyway, I was gonna wait till, under other staff reports, but, we received a letter from Brad and Sandra Harlacher from 708 Meadow Street, and it reads, "We're asking the city council, please vote to provide some type of yard waste disposal to West Burlington residents, an alternate drop-off site or curbside pickup as promised in the spring newsletter. Driving to the landfill is not convenient for anyone. Burning is bad for the environment and not safe given the current dry conditions. Taking away this service will only encourage people to put yard waste in their regular trash containers." And attached is a copy of the newsletter that went out back in the spring, where temporary options for yard waste disposal. We had said Public Works will pick up leave bags for residential properties on Mondays in April, October, and November. Place yard waste bags at the curb before 7 a.m. on Mondays. So since this was in the newsletter back then, I would imagine that we ought to do it.
We'll plan on doing it.
I disagree with part of the letter here that says it's, the landfill is not convenient for everyone. So far, we haven't had one complaint about not being able to drive to the landfill.
We'll have that broader discussion regarding public works and long-term use here in the near future, but, so it'll start on the 18th and run through the last Monday. So it'll be each Monday between the 18th and the last, I believe it's the 29th.
Of November, whatever date that is.
7 a.m., have bags out by 7 a.m. Kelly did get some information out as well regarding the landfill and yard waste, so please feel free to share that information as well. And I guess lastly, I shouldn't have planted a red maple in back of 708 Meadow Street when I moved in, so.
Also, don't panic and call City Hall if yours don't get picked up Monday morning, because if this becomes a huge amount of leaves, that might be all I get done all week, is going around with the loader and dump trucks and picking them up. So if you don't see yours removed Monday out of your yard, don't panic. We'll get to them. We'll get started Monday morning, and we'll just have to see how long it takes.
You know, the other thing I thought of is that when we bought our new handy-dandy street sweeper, it had a big suck-up vacuum on it. What if people were to rake their leaves to the curbside, we just come through and suck it up, because doesn't that mulch it at the same time and a dump truck follow and dump it?
I can't keep up with people dumping their whole yards into the street, especially on the weekend.
The street sweeper isn't built for that. You need a specific, you need a leaf vac in order to do that. It's a 3-person operation, driver, raker, somebody to rake, and then somebody to run the hose. It's a 3-person operation, but it's a specific leaf vac that's needed in order to do that, especially with those heavier leaves or if they get wet as well. But it's about a 3-person operation, and $60,000 piece of equipment, I believe, roughly what they run.
Last time we checked.
We've done it,
We have a couple
Been out
spots
there
now
for
that we
about
have
10
to
years.
pick up leaves, like down the fence on Van Wees, and they get wet. Even our sewer jet, you plug it when they're all wet and rained on it, and you spend hours and hours with 3 or 4 guys just to get that fence done. They're not designed to, the actual trailers, I think, are a lot bigger too, bigger opening where they'll take up the balls of wet stuff too, and this works fine for intakes and things like that, but that sweeper won't, we can't take everybody's yard dumped into the street. Besides that, if everybody raked them all out in the street on the weekend and we came in Monday, they're gonna be scattered across the whole street. It's not like there's gonna be a windrow there for us to pick up.
So then when you pick up these bags of leaves, are you gonna take the end loader with you if the bags are so?
Pretty much
heavy?
have to, because I can't have my guys trying to heave them up over the side of a dump truck. I'll have work injuries then. We'll have
So it'll
them,
be a-
we'll have them stick them, one guy be running the loader, we'll have a guy on the ground throwing them in the loader bucket, and another guy in the dump truck, and when he leaves, there'll be another dump truck with another guy behind him, so they're not waiting on the dump truck to get back from the landfill. We'll probably have 2 or 3 trucks lined up, and I'll have a pretty good share of my crew just going through town doing it.
So just to ask, is it better now to maybe think about going back and finding a temporary spot? Even if we put, let's say you've got to bag it, and you can drop your bags at this location. And we could put a dumpster there to fill, or 3, or,
I gave Greg some pictures of our site, what we deal with, and when I talked to Levine's, they pretty much wanted no part of it, because that was what will happen to dumpsters. Even if you put them in bags, we furnish a dumpster, you will get wood, furniture, batteries, tires, and then Levine's guy will have to stand there and sort all that stuff on every load. It just don't work. I mean, we deal with it daily at our own site. I wish we would monitor cameras and start doing more finding or whatever we can for that, maybe try and control that.
The calls that I've taken are for individuals that couldn't use that resource. So really, the best option for them, in my mind, would be that Levine option, where they just, they have the unit and they pull it out, and Levine's comes to pick it up on demand, or, but the couple calls that I've taken, and they really have only come this week, but likely because the leaves are starting to drop, but that's been the main issue, is that they have difficulty getting them, or taking them away from their site. So having somebody like Levine come to them seemed to be the best option.
Jesse, what you got?
We did qualifications last night, yesterday, our fall qualifications, everybody did well. We did a shoot up there a month ago, and Beckman's brought up a vehicle. We've never shot really at vehicles and seen how different calibers did against different parts of the vehicle, so we learned quite a bit, and we just wanted to thank Beckman's for donating a vehicle for us. I let Greg know a little bit ago, we're in the need of a new RMS reporting system for the police department. It's a county-wide system that we're looking at, that we're currently on, as a county-wide thing. We talked about going up to Joe Davies County, but Major Klein from Burlington Police Department talked with them earlier, and they're on the older model than what we would be getting. So he talked to Humboldt County in Iowa. In the last 5 weeks, Motorola's been on scene, on site training, and they just went live with it this past Monday. So we're looking at going out there to Humboldt County next Tuesday or Thursday to go over their RMS system and see how it will work with us. That's all I got.
What's an RMS system?
It's our reporting system. That's where we do all of our reports. It's a shared program between us, Burlington, and the Sheriff's Department. And we're also looking at getting dispatch on the same program. We used to be, but about 6 months ago, the dispatch got away from Shield. That is our current user. And it's been nothing but a headache since they switched for all the departments. So we're looking at going with another company to get everybody back on board.
But the reason they switched from Shield is because Shield no longer supports stuff.
They are very, very outdated system, yes. And it's unfortunate because Shield is used by a lot of departments, by a lot of agencies, and it's just something that they have not been keeping up with, their end of the deal.
Do you have anything for Jesse? Sean?
I'll be sending letters out tomorrow to notify rental property owners of inspections that we need to do before the end of the year. Preferably have them done as close to the end of the month or before the middle of November as at all possible. Burn-in is scheduled. That's not just the 507 building, but that's all of their buildings, so it's almost 100 apartments. That's scheduled for next Thursday. The football team is doing their Unity Night right now up at the fire station. And tomorrow I've got the elementary doing tours at the fire station for Fire Prevention Safety Week. I'll be doing a tabletop exercise at the Klein Center on Friday that pertains to both building and fire. It has to do with emergency evacuations, recommendations, suggestions, and we'll work on a tabletop exercise with all involved parties. And then I'd also like to thank Beckman's. They donated 4 vehicles for us, set them up. On Monday night, we had Sandry Fire come down and TNT extrication tools come in, and the guys learned quite a few new techniques, myself included, as far as different information on how to handle vehicles that become lodged on top of each other, things that we had never really taken into consideration, so it was good training.
May I have anything for Sean? Kelly, you got anything going on? Angie?
I just wanted to bring up, I think we should start.
Angie, I thought you said
Oh,
it.
sorry.
That's all right, then I'll get to you in a second, Andy.
No, I'll be out of the office all week next week. That's about it.
Oh, Andy.
I just wanted to bring up, I think we should start talking about the sidewalks before the snow starts flying, if we're going to discuss that this year, and what Sean's supposed to do on that, since I know we kind of discussed that last year, but it was mid-year.
That
Be
would,
planning on a
that
fall
would take an
newsletter.
ordinance change, probably.
Are we planning on a fall newsletter that we could make it clear about the ordinance, having your sidewalk shovel within a certain time frame? Because apparently we didn't do that last year, because we didn't make it well known that sidewalks had to be shoveled within a certain time frame. And then when we brought it up in February, March, it was going to be too late in the season to do anything with it.
It was Pat's recommendation that we put something in the fall newsletter regarding that, because you're correct, it's 24 hours after snowfall to have their sidewalks cleaned. So, yeah, I remember Pat's recommendation was that we start putting the word out here with the fall newsletter and getting it out.
Is it a citation after that, or what is it? Do you know?
It would be treated the same as a grass violation, that we would have to hire somebody to come in and remove the snow. It was, if I recall correctly from the conversation that we had back and forth with Pat. We would handle it as simple as a standard nuisance, we would have to abate it.
And then if you're going to do a fall newsletter, Kelly, which I guess you're going to now, it would be great for people that have a snow shoveling business, that we can remind them that if they want to get listed, to pay whatever they have to pay.
We can do that.
I think it's going to snow like next week.
No.
Hope you're wrong.
Denied.
Anything else, Andy?
No, that's it, thanks.
Tracy, got anything?
No.
Mike, did you want to mention that we're going to do hydrant flushing?
Oh, yes, I forgot. We're done adding chlorine to the water, Burlington and West Burlington both. So next Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be flushing all of our hydrants. Burlington's flushing theirs, so that strong chlorine smell will go away in your water.
Mel, you got anything?
Just, we've ordered campaign signs for people running for uncontested offices, and in about 2 weeks, we'll be putting them out. So,
Okay. Righty. This time, anyone wishing to address council matters that are not on the agenda tonight, can step forward. Okay, we'll go to new business, and Maggie Berger from Spear Financial, our financial advisor, is here. She's going to take us through our Tiff report.
Hi there. We're going to start with the Tiff report, then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion, so you get a double whammy from me tonight. So thanks everyone for having me. I'm Maggie Berger with Spear. We've brought your colorful pages down. It was a push this week to get these done. We got a new color copier at the office, and the colors were not coming out the way the old colors used to. So it's been an interesting week with Tiff reports for us, but I think we're back in the good. So we've got your general obligation debt represented on the red pages of your report. You have a 2008 SRF loan that is callable, meaning you could pay that off, pay it down, pay it ahead if you wanted to. The interest rate, remember, on an SRF loan is 1.75% interest, 0.25% annual administration. You see that effective 2% interest rate up there in that header where it says TIC. That is true interest cost. We give you the amount that was issued. You also have a 2017 bond issue outstanding for $3.7 million, or that was what the original was. That is at a 2.3% interest rate. If you look a couple, 3 lines down under the principal, there's an underline under the $540,000 amount in 2024. That is when that bond becomes callable. We give you the total principal and interest. You are paying for the 2017 bond wholly with TIF revenue, and you are paying with the 2008 SRF with local option sales tax revenue. What that means is the city does not currently levy a property tax levy. So we've drawn an arrow to that blank column. There are no property taxes levied for any of the debt that is outstanding. They are GO debts, and you always could levy a property tax for them. We go on to your orange page, and this is where we talk about the revenue debt outstanding for the city. You have a water revenue bond from 2008. Sewer revenue bond from 2017, and then in 2020 you entered into not only a sewer revenue bond but also a water revenue bond. All of the outstanding revenue debt that you have is through the state revolving fund. So again, that SRF program, effective 2% interest rates on all of them. The 2008 are callable. The 17 will be callable in just about 5-6 years. The 2020 and the water and sewer will be callable in about 10 years. So those have about a 10-year call date on them, meaning that you can call them, pay them off in full. The biggest takeaway from this is revenue debt, and it can only be paid with revenues of the system. So the far right column, or that second to the far right column, is total property taxes. It's 0 all the way down. It's always going to be 0 on this page because you cannot use property taxes to pay this revenue debt. The purple pages of your report are the TIF rebate obligations. You have just 1 more year of a rebate obligation for Millennium Hall. You have a few more years on Blackhawk Tower, and then you also have given the Greater Burlington Partnership a support appropriation every year for the next few years in the amount of $5,000. All of those rebates are calculated across, and they are all annually appropriated, which means you, the council, take action every November to say, yes, in the next fiscal year, we will appropriate giving that rebate, we will appropriate giving that support. What that does is that keeps, instead of the $487,000 total counting against your debt capacity, you only have to count the $76,000 against your debt capacity, which is a very important piece because debt capacity is a couple pages back, but that's the amount of debt that you can have outstanding at one time. And so the lower we can keep that debt by those annual appropriation language, the better for you. Our yellow part of our TIF report is the TIF revenue certification. So this is where we certify any debt that is going to go against the TIF. As I mentioned on the red pages, the full 2017 bond is being paid with TIF. We transfer that into the debt service. That's just a reminder to the administration that that's how they'll be using that. You have some interfund loans that were done, and these were for condos, and so you've got some sub-funds or some funds that are being paid back with those agreements. We've got that from 2011, the Park Place West, 2015, we'll call it the Street Shop lot at 515 West Glasgow, and then we've got LMI on that 2015, that low to moderate income set aside that you must set aside. The rate at that time was 42.95% for the county. We bring in those TIF rebate agreements, again, because this is where we certify. And you can see under fiscal year 23, we have a certification there of $738,781 is what you will be asking for. And that will be coming, as your city administrator mentioned, that will be coming to you at your November agendas. You will always pass those and ask for those dollars before December 1st, which is the deadline. Your green pages talk about debt capacity, so this is kind of going back to that discussion on those annual appropriation. Column number 2 is where you are at for fiscal year 22. You have a property actual valuation or 100% value of $310 million here in the city. That did grow by just over 1% from last year. You have statutory debt limit. This is the constitutional debt limit of $15,502,000. Outstanding is that $3,423,000. That is the principal of those red pages or the GO debt. You have rebate agreements of that $76,242 this year. You will pay back, so we get to add this back in, of $537,000 of GO principal and the $76,242. So remaining debt capacity at the end of the fiscal year will be $12,616,000, or about 81%, meaning you have a high amount of debt capacity still remaining. In years past, the council has asked us to not ever, to build in a contingency here of 20%, which means you would never issue more than 80% of what your total debt capacity could be. So if we take off that $3 million, which is the 20%, right off that top number of 15, we get down to $9,515,000 of remaining debt capacity. For a community that has grown in size like West Burlington, and the projects that you've done, having a debt capacity still of, approximately $9.5 million is a very high number. It's a very good debt capacity. That just means that you've not issued debt for every, we'll say everything, that you've planned accordingly on the debt outstanding. Plus, it also should be noted that, we would always recommend that when you do revenue projects, water projects, big sewer projects, that you are paying for those with revenue debts. They should be paid with the utility system itself, and that helps keep that debt off of your debt capacity. So that's very important there as well. We built in a growth rate of just 0.5% to be conservative, and that goes on for a couple of pages just to kind of show you that by about fiscal year 28, everything is gone between rebates and debt if you were to do nothing else at this time. And then the last part of our report is our actual TIF report. This talks about how much growth and valuation has occurred in your TIF district since the inception or the beginning of those TIF districts. We look at column number 2, which is fiscal year 22. There's $93 million of growth in commercial property, $6.2 million of growth in industrial. We skip down to residential. We've got about $67 million of growth and about $6.9 million of multi-residential. So this total is about $132 million taxable, because we do take the rollback on everything. We take that times your TIF tax rate of $30.10, and that should produce around, almost just at $4 million, about $3,988,000. You are using $613,000 this year for your GO payments. You're using the $76,000 for the rebate payments, and then between the interfund loans and the low to moderate income obligations, you've got about another $53,000 you're using. So out of the 3.9, you have unclaimed TIF dollars of about 3.2. I tell you every year, I'm not telling you to go grab the 3.2. The money that makes up that valuation to get that 3.2, when you do not use that, that rolls back into your budget, the school's budget, the county's budget. So everyone is seeing growth. As your TIF district grows at 1.4%, if you continue to collect at about the same amount every year, as long as there's that steady growth, everyone is gonna see a small amount of growth every year in their budgets, which I know is important. So you're utilizing TIF the exact way TIF was meant to be utilized by the state legislature. So with that, I would answer any questions you have about that before we talk about some other things.
So that 1.44% growth, that's actual?
Yeah, that is actual growth in the TIF area.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that would just be related, you had 1% growth overall in the city, but the TIF area actually grew at about 1.44%.
And then the 0.75 across the bottom, that, you use that just as planning
We
or
just use that for
projection?
planning projections. Again, you've grown, we're very careful that when you only have like 1 or 1.5% growth, we knock it down to under 1%. Then there's gonna be a year where you're gonna have 4% growth, and we may, utilize a 1 or a 2%. So we just kind of gauge off of where it's been the last couple of years to just give you some conservative numbers. So the bottom part I should talk about, we haven't used it necessarily for a project that you've got, but this bottom part is an interesting builder for TIF, and we're gonna use it in another city here in the next couple of days. If you have a development that comes to you, whether it's commercial, industrial, residential, and says, we want to build, but your water doesn't get there, let's say you're 600 foot short, shy of the water getting there, or sewer, and you want to take that project on, do that for yourself, maybe that's a project you want to pay for. We will plug in what the debt service or the repayment is, and then we'll plug in numbers up above for what we believe the valuation of that new development was going to be. So if that new development's going to be worth $3 million, and we are able to tell you, if we wipe out all the other values up here and we just stand alone, we can tell you, will that pay for the work that you're going to run out there, the infrastructure that you're going to run out there? Are they going to generate enough new property taxes with new valuation that you can collect those dollars and pay for that? That's kind of like a one-off. So we do use that builder down below, especially when you're looking at specific new development that's coming in and how you might be able to pay for it.
So that just projects what you could collect in TIF,
Correct, what you could collect in TIF for, again, the repayment of that
or a rebate,
obligation.
TIF rebate.
Absolutely, or a TIF rebate, correct, absolutely, so. Okay.
Anybody have any questions, comments on this? As usual, it's a very good report, and, you might not understand it the first time around, but the more you see it and the more you go through it, like you do, and you do a very good presentation, it's easy to understand. With that being said, the second part of this, Greg wants to lead us into it.
Thank you, appreciate it. So we've been working to provide some additional information. I brought up the topic before. While Maggie mentioned that we're utilizing TIF appropriately, we may not be utilizing geo bonds and other tools, and I guess in the best fashion that we could. There are, in my opinion, we shouldn't necessarily be utilizing TIF to pay back, for example, all of our geo debt. And there's some reasons for that. And so we thought we'd just kind of bring an intro, one to the bonding process, some options that we could talk about going forward, some ways to perhaps begin thinking about utilizing the property tax levy, which gives you more bang for your buck versus tax increment financing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it all at once or dive in with both feet, but that it's really, I think it's time to start thinking about doing things a little bit differently in how we fund our projects. And so just wanted to bring the introduction tonight, and that's the information that you have before you. And if you have questions, feel free to, subsequently shoot those to me. We can get answers to those, bring that back to the group and continue the discussion. So with that, I think we'll kind of dive in with the presentation first, and then the additional attachments as well, and just kind of run through those.
All right.
Great.
So talking a little bit about the bonding process, not sure everyone has been here throughout a bonding process, so it's kind of important to just kind of have a sense of where that stands. So when you're determining a project or a purchase, you're doing that through capital improvements planning, or a CIP, that's commonly referred to. That CIP usually is what's outlining what that project or purchase is, and it may be a CIP that's 5 years from now to 5 years in the future, it may be for 10 years in the future, but also you're determining how that possibly is going to be repaid. So we've got a street project. We're going to sit around and talk about how is that going to be repaid? Are we thinking water? Are we thinking sewer? Is it something that sits in the TIF district? Does it lead to economic development? You know, things like that. So not only does that capital projects make the list, but it also talks about what are your possible repayment sources. The other part of this is if you are going to use TIF, just so everyone knows, there's urban renewal work that must be completed. In 2012, there were some changes to the TIF law or the urban renewal law, and I think we're pretty well versed in it at this point in time, but just so everyone knows, there's quite a process that goes through it with bond counsel, your administration, making decisions ahead. So it's very hard for you to come to us and say, we're gonna bond, and we're gonna bond next month, and we are gonna pay for it with TIF. That can't happen because there's about a 90-day window of projects or resolutions that you need to do per the law to get that done. So when we're talking about an urban renewal plan amendment, what that's doing is it's establishing the project, it's establishing the cost, and within what urban renewal. If you have multiple urban renewal areas or TIF areas, it's establishing where those might be located at. Part of the other part of the bonding process, just so you know, is there are public hearings that have to be done because it is the law. I wrote an article actually for the League magazine this month that talks about public hearings because people tell me all the time, I don't need a public hearing to go out and borrow money. You do actually need a public hearing. The law states that you do because you are utilizing residents' dollars, whether they're TIF, whether they're tax dollars or their utility revenues and user fees. You are utilizing taxpayer money, and you must inform the taxpayers and give them an opportunity to speak to the project that you're doing. Then there's the sale of bonds, which actually locks in the debt and the repayment schedule. We give lots of schedules ahead of time as projections. We work with the administration all throughout this process. And then the bond closing, just so everyone knows, that's the day you receive the funds for those project expenditures. It also should be stated here that when you are talking about a bond closing, you receive all of the money right then and there. So on a GO note, you get every dollar right then and there. So we are very broad in our public hearings for the purposes, which just means if we have leftover money, because we are going to do this project and maybe the project comes in less money, it never happens, right? I'm going to look at Public Works, it never happens. But we're going to be, say that it's going to happen. We're very broad in our public hearing proceedings so that if you have leftover money, you can spend it on other projects. We don't say specific streets, we say sewer mains. That way then if you have extra money, you can go do other sewer mains and do things in other parts of the community that you did not anticipate that you don't have money for. So that's just kind of the bonding process. As part of the bonding process, we've talked a little bit about, and if it's okay, I think we'll talk about fund balances at this point in time. Sure. And so I'm going to
Real quick before you do that though, on the urban renewal plan, two things. One, just because it's in the urban renewal plan doesn't mean you have to utilize TIF. What you'll see is us bringing forward projects to include in the urban renewal plan in case we want to utilize TIF for those projects. So there may be extra projects that are included in there. We'll also typically bring in an estimate that's higher. And oftentimes I'll add a couple $100,000 onto that amount, depending on the project that is, and the amount that's utilized or added to the urban renewal plan, so that it gives you flexibility to utilize TIF and it gives you flexibility in the dollar amount. Just because it's in the plan doesn't mean it has to be used and doesn't mean it's going to be that amount. It just covers us, and it's also one step in the process that we don't have to do later. So I like to do as much as possible and add it to the urban renewal plan if we know that it's coming. So one, we save on legal fees, and two, just because it's in there, you don't have to spend it.
Right. Great point. Great point. We always say, put it in there. You may or may not. And the other thing I should mention is you can sell a bond and issue a bond, and this council can say, we're gonna pay it with these sources of revenue. And the next council, or you all, can change your mind the next time you budget. A general obligation bond can be paid with a lot of different sources of revenue. So if you get to the next budget time and you were gonna use, let's say, local option sales tax, well, in the meantime, something else has come up for local option sales tax that you really feel that's a better use of those dollars, you can just say, well, we're gonna not pay that debt with local option sales tax. We still have to pay the debt, but now that may implement a debt service levy, or we may pay it with water, sewer, because maybe it was related to that type of a project as well. So you get to make those decisions each and every year when you're doing your budget. So let's see if we click on the right one here. There we go. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about fund balances as well. We had a conversation. Most communities, I will say, do not have a fund balance policy, but communities should have a fund balance policy. A fund balance really, and we're going to just use a few of your larger funds here as examples. The Government Finance Officers, or GFOA, which is an organization that I belong to, it's a nationwide organization, they recommend that a city maintain 25 to 50% of your annual expenditures in fund balances per fund. So let me just explain that. If I have if my general fund has expenses of $1 million a year, normal governmental cost spending is $1 million, I should have at least $250,000, that's 25%, in my general fund at the end of every year in fund balance. I say fund balance is your savings account. It's what's left over. You all have you all try to work off of a balanced budget, but we all keep our fingers crossed that revenues will exceed expenses and there will be some leftover money. Leftover money is what becomes fund balance, and you should be working to build fund balance. So again, 25 to 50%. I believe that you should look at every fund and say, well, if we only kept 25% fund balance, would we be able to run the city for how long before we'd run through all of our cash? And the real key here is if you only had 25% fund balance, in a perfect world, you could run the city for a quarter of the year. And people say, well, why would I need to run the city without any cash? Because if you happen to be in an area where there's a natural disaster and your county doesn't get tax bills out in the fall, no one has to go pay their taxes till December. Twice in Lynn County has that happened. The flood and the derecho. They can't get the tax bills out because they had enough damage that it was December before anyone had to pay their taxes. So you as a city have had to operate from July to December without getting any property tax dollars in. So that's really the key to making the fund balance and thinking about that fund balance. So in your general fund, we gave you some examples. On June 30th of 2021, the general fund had a fund balance of $784,000. You annually run about $2,778,000 of expenses. So your percent to expenses right now is about 28%. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's something you want to improve on. I will say a lot of cities in Iowa, their goals are that 25 to 50%. Like we will never drop below the 25, but we would shoot or aim for the 50% just because it's a little bit more cash on hand. Road use tax, again, sometimes road use tax can be an in and an out. Like we're going to use all of our road use tax in 1 year because we've got some big projects, but it does look like you're running right now about a 67%. Now, I would say this, if you have a big project next year, that could drop to 12%. So again, that may be one that fluctuates a little bit more than the rest of them. Local option sales tax, about $414,000 fund balance, that's at about 83%. Like road use, it could fluctuate. You could spend a whole lot of money out of that on one project that's been planned. I think the bigger takeaway is planned projects, that CIP. If you are going to spend the money out of your fund balance, you should be determining ahead of spending it when you're going to build that back up, how you're going to build that back up, when that's going to happen. Water and sewer are two key fund balance areas for me that I have lots of opinions on. Your water fund balance, I think, should be 50 to 100%. That's my personal opinion. Water projects just happen. we have something in the middle of the winter break, and we have to go out and repair it, and it can be a lot of money. Water and sewer alike, I think there are lots of expenses that can go along with that. Your water fund balance is only at about 2% right now. I do have a little caveat there, we have a little asterisk. The water fund will be reimbursed about $13,000 from funds that you spent on your sponsored stormwater project. But $13,000 to that $17,000 isn't gonna get you probably much above like 3 or 4% at that point in time. So that is an area we say that you should be definitely looking at how to raise that fund balance in the water. Sewer, you are sitting at about 67%, and also there's actually, that could be a higher number because you do have about 171,000 that will be. So that stormwater project, you had to expense all of the money on that, and then you will get that back when it closes out from the SRF program. That was grant money that it was coming into you. So fund balance, really, as we said, should just kind of be spent on one-time expenditures, emergencies, unplanned expenditures. Someone calls and says, we're coming to town and we need water now. And it's a great development, it's gonna bring lots of new jobs. That's a one-time expense, like we need to go out and do it now. That's what fund balance is there for, is those emergencies, those one-offs that kind of pop up. But again, when you deplete that fund balance, you should look to rebuild it so that it comes back up to a healthy level. I know that your administrator can help you and administration can help establish fund balance policies. I can tell you that cities do establish them and it takes a little bit to work towards them. But I definitely would encourage you to think about a fund balance policy in the future. As you continue to grow, I think it's an important piece to your puzzle. All right, now I gotta try to get back to there we go, back to there. So then we've got some options here that we want to talk a little bit about. Your city is going to receive $400,000 in total ARPA funds, and we're going to abbreviate that. That's your American Recovery Plan funds. You're going to get $400,000. You got half of it right now, and the other half is going to come next summer. Right now, you're in a very large water project with the SRF. You're doing a very large water project. If you apply all of those funds, the $400,000 between this year and next year, to that water project expense, you could borrow less money. So if you just used some of that cash, all of that cash, you could borrow less money. You don't have to borrow all the money that the SRF allows for you, but you could borrow less money. In doing that, right now, I believe you have scheduled a 15% water rate increase in January of 22. That could result in going down to only a 10% water rate increase. That $400,000, if you did not have that on the final debt service, you could lower that increase to 10%. That's approximately $6 per month and we'll call it an average residential user. The use of the ARPA funds could lower that rate increase to maybe $3 to $4 per month in a residential user as well. Or I'm sorry, the 15%, it goes up about $6 a month. If you had used the ARPA funds, you would only have to go up about $3 to $4 a month, which is significant over time. You also could keep the 15% rate increase, that's your choice, in January of 22 and build up that water fund balance, because we did just look at that water fund. And so if you do implement the 15% and use the ARPA funds, that would give you an opportunity to start building up that fund balance. The savings on the water bill, if you saved money on the water bill, so we're gonna switch gears here and talk a little bit about saving money, and then we're gonna go through some of the examples here. But saving money on the water bill, actually, we sort of looked at, well, if that was, $3 to $4, if you could save $2 a month, what does $2 a month maybe get us? So with the savings on the water bill, if you were to just do the 10% increase, we also looked at your levy rate. So back in fiscal year 21, the city had a levy rate of $10 a thousand here in the city. And then in fiscal year 22, you did lower that by 35 cents to $9.65. I don't know what that was all in relation to, if you just didn't have the expenses or if that was planned to go down the 90, to the 35 cents to the 965. But you will always hear from me as your financial advisor. And I know that that's not what everybody runs on when you run for mayor and council, but we always say do not be afraid of that property tax levy and trying to keep that level and working things in to that level levy. The extra 35 cents could be used in a debt service levy, and that could generate approximately $74,000 per year for projects. So that just means that you could go out and borrow some money, and we're going to show you some examples. If you wanted to go back up, let's say in fiscal year 23 to that $10 level, that would allow you to borrow some money in a general obligation bond. You have some projects coming up, and you could generate from the debt service levy to help pay that $74,000 per year. Now again, some of you may say, well, we didn't have a debt service levy before, but what we're saying is that 35 cents could be used in a debt service levy and not go back above the $10 that you were at existing. You could consider also something like bonding every other year for projects and setting a levy that doesn't fluctuate. So most of our councils say they want to set a tax levy and they want to kind of keep it there for the next few years. If it is something that you're interested in setting a levy with no fluctuation, then we can help you kind of work through that and talk through that and what that may look like from that perspective. But that 35 cents per year, you're going to see on some schedules that we've got for you, really could be an offset of what that water increase would be. So you really kind of can say, do we increase the water, or should we maybe implement and go back up to the $10 property tax levy? I know one of them is through user fees, but one of them is also through property tax. So let's go in here. And this is a water pro forma, and this gets very complicated, but this is what I have to turn in. Right there where it says 15% at the top number, the 15% number, that is fiscal year 22. Right now in July of 21, you implemented a 15% rate increase. We're saying if you implemented a 10% rate increase, again, down below, as you look at that, you're looking at what the water services charges are, what those are. The biggest takeaway from this is we have to maintain a 110 coverage. In that orange line, about 3/4 of the way down, it says debt service coverage. For you to borrow money through the SRF, you have to maintain a 110 coverage. That's how we got to the 10%. That's how we worked down to the 10%. So basically, with that 10%, it is going to save you a couple of dollars every month versus where you're at. And that's where we're saying that's something we could implement. Right now, again, if you use those ARPA funds, you could lower that January 2022 rate increase to the 10% if you wanted to. Otherwise, you could keep it also at the 15%. This is what it was supposed to look like. You were supposed to increase the 15. This means you're not using any ARPA money. And again, the whole key here is we have to maintain the debt service coverage of 1.1 times. And how we get there is water revenues minus water expenses. That gives you net income and the purple line for debt service. And then both of your debts, your 2008 water debt, which is a revenue debt, part of it is, and then the 2021. The new payments, and this is maybe where we should focus on too, if you don't use any of the $400,000 of ARPA funds, those payments that you're looking at on this new water project are approximately $395,000 a year. I'll go back here to the other one. If we do use $400,000 of those ARPA funds and we buy the size of this bond issue down, you are looking at only $355,000 a year payment. So you're dropping the payment itself by about $40,000, which I think is pretty substantial off of $400,000. If off of just generating $400,000 and using it, you can really drop that payment by $40,000 a year and maybe give yourself a break. Not, necessarily now, but, if you look at it and we go to page 2 of that one, in 2028, that other debt drops off. And now all of a sudden you're heavy $24,000 because at that point in time, the $25,000 payment that is out there right now from 2008 will drop off and mature as well. So just a little discussion on that, if that is, I know that's a lot of numbers on one page. So now let's go back and let's talk a little bit about how we talked about this 35 cents. If the city wanted to implement that 35 cents back into your budget in fiscal year 23, you could borrow $665,000 for that 35 cents over 10 years. It doesn't mean that that's all you can borrow, because again, you could pay for parts of the other debt with other sources of revenue. We could say $665,000 is going to be paid with debt service. You know, $200,000 is going to be paid with local option sales tax. Maybe there is a portion that it's going to be paid with TIF, but this is a starting point to that discussion. This $665,000, and it's a little, you know, it's not, let's see if we can make this a bigger, go there. This $665,000, this represents the $74,000 payment there in the center. So again, at 2% interest rate, we can borrow $665,000, what we call level debt, payments about the same every year. And based on your valuation in yellow, this is your taxable valuation of $211 million in that yellow column. That is a generated tax rate of 35 cents. So 35 cents is what we're looking at here that you could generate in debt service levy for the 665. That will result in property taxes. If I own a house in West Burlington that's valued at $100,000, that'll be about $19 per year or $20 per year. So we just said you could save $2 per month if you just use the ARPA money and didn't raise everybody's rates by that extra 5% in water. So that $2 per month, this is how we generate it and say, this is where you could offset that. You could raise that levy back up to the 35 cents. It would be a slight increase in everyone's taxes, but that $20 that they're gonna see the increase in taxes is coming off of their water bill.
Not necessarily, it was $2 to $3, so it was 24 to 36, and it depends on the value of the home as well.
Correct.
So it's really close to offsetting it dollar for dollar, depending on the home, if we were to do that. And we could actually, we could tweak it so that we could use an average user and or an average value, and you could tweak it so that there wasn't an increase.
Correct. So this is just kind of showing you this. Now, the other part that we also do to this is, I'm going to show you one more schedule. So this is saying just 35 cents for the next few years. If you tell me, well, we want to issue some debt in 22, but then maybe in 24 we want to issue some more debt that may need to fit into that 35 cents, we're going to look at a different schedule, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. So when that happens, what we do in the green, and I've drawn kind of the red box around it, the first couple of years of debt payments we made at 35 cents. Then we reduce the rest of them down to 17 cents, which is half of 35 cents. And that's where we call this more of a wraparound debt approach. I have a lot of communities that use this. The first 2 years of the debt payment are 35 cents because that's what they've set. Then the debt drops off. In this scenario, you could borrow $400,000 under this scenario of 35, and then letting it drop, because then you bring in new debt and you have 17 cents to build back into that new debt. You're probably looking with valuation growth of another $200,000 to $300,000 that you can bring in and spread out. And that's a lot of times the way that it's done is cities will look at their debt service levy, and as it starts to look like it's going to drop off, they turn around and they say, well, what were the projects that we were going to do? And if you bond every other year, every 3 years, this is a type of model that can work. So
yeah, and that's what I would typically recommend or prefer is that we look at it, doing it on a regular basis, whether it be 2 or 3 years, and then we bring on debt. We bring when that debt drops, you bring on another project. And what you're doing is you're keeping that levy rate level,
right.
By utilizing this model, so the residents aren't seeing that fluctuation. Mm-hmm. You're bringing in projects, you're able to do those projects more often, and offset those costs. But you're able to do that every other year or every 3 years, depending on what projects we have outstanding, and keep the levy level.
Levy level, right. And this also plays in a little bit to your capital improvements, hence the reason we wanted to talk about this. As you talk about projects that you're gonna do in the future, you know, when you're planning your capital improvements, if you think that you're gonna borrow every couple of years, that's then what you kind of plan for. Maybe in the off years that you're not borrowing, you would just have smaller projects that you could do pay as you go, because they're a small one-time, small project that could be utilized with some fund balance or something like that. Then on the years that you are gonna bond, that's the years that you do heavier, bigger projects, because you already know that you're gonna go out and borrow for those. And so that's kind of how you stack your capital improvements, is depending on how often you want to borrow. And I will say this, for a city the size of West Burlington, borrowing every 2 or 3 years, absolutely acceptable. I have a lot of cities that are maybe larger than you, and they borrow every single year. They have to meet their capital improvements, you know, project plans. But I think for a city your size, every other year to every third year would be just fine. I think you would find that you can accomplish all of your projects in a pretty easy way.
As long as we have the cash on hand in order to pay for it.
Correct.
And to cover that timeframe.
Correct. So let's go back to our presentation, and we'll kind of get to our last slide here. So this, we're just going to talk a little bit about tax increment financing here as kind of a tool. TIF is a tool, and it is used to pay obligations off. So an obligation is a debt, a rebate, something like that, an interfund loan. But it only happens when you have growth in the urban renewal area. So something grows, gives you new valuation. The city can collect the majority of new tax dollars that are generated to pay that obligation. So you have every right to collect the portion that the county of growth would see, the portion that the school growth would see. I will caveat that the school does get backfill from the state. The county's really the party that loses on the TIF deal. They just don't see that growth. They get all of what they've been getting. They just don't see the growth that is happening. And so that's the way to think about TIF, is you're collecting that new growth for a set number of time to pay your obligations.
But the argument is that, but for the TIF, typically, the project wouldn't necessarily happen.
Correct.
So ultimately, down the road, everybody benefits in their general fund with a growing valuation.
Correct. And you would hope that with growth and valuation brings new families, possibly new businesses, and that will help support not only the county, but the school district and their goals of bringing in new students as well. So new valuation continues to grow in the valuations assigned to the debt service levies for all entities. So this statement really just means debt service is protected. No one gets to touch the debt service. If you TIF something, it's not reflected in the debt service. So that is why we say you get more bang for your buck when you use a debt service levy. The reason that we talked about the 35 cents being levied in the debt service. So if you look down here in my example, and I'm gonna blow this up and then I will take it down here. If you look in the example, for fiscal year 22, your valuations, and this is, you can look at your budget, these numbers come right off your budget. Your general fund taxable valuation is $184 million. That's what you can tax against in the general fund. In the debt service fund, you get to tax against $11 million. The reason is the general fund gets depleted because of TIF, because you're asking for TIF, but the debt service, the county's debt service, the school's debt service, the community college's debt service, they can't touch TIF. So there's your growth difference from 211 to 184 of what you're utilizing in TIF valuation. You're utilizing about $25 million in TIF valuation to meet all of your obligations that are outstanding. So you do get more bang for your buck. If I were just gonna levy 35 cents extra in the general fund, if you went back up to $10 and that 35 cents was in the general fund, it would only generate $64,000. But if you levy in the debt service, so we add the 35 cents back in next year and it goes towards the debt service, you actually generate $74,000. You get $10,000 more by levying it in the debt service. So I always tell cities, I know that people are very nervous about debt and nervous about putting a debt service levy in, but when you're talking about a difference in valuation or a difference in levy rate that you've had and how you could implement that 35 cents back in, you definitely get more bang for your buck doing it in the debt service fund than you do in the general fund. So just a little note there. And then we've got here, you can use funds for TIF-related administration costs annually as well. So we had a lot of conversation about that and finding some of your admin costs that you can break out and use TIF monies for it. That helps free up your general fund as well. That can free up some property tax dollars in your general fund. And then we also talk about the protected levies for the schools. So not only is the debt service levy protected for all the entities, but schools also get school instructional and the Pebble. So if they have school instructional or Pebble, they've got, which everybody does, maybe not Pebble, but the school instructional, they would see the same valuation difference like you're seeing there. So they, on their budgets, they see a difference in general fund and a difference in debt service levy. So if your school district is levying a debt service for GO debt, they're going to see a difference in what they can generate from that. Again, same with school instructional and Pebble, which means they do get a lot more protections. Again, the county is the one who loses out on the askings of TIF. TIF is typically discussed annually by the legislature and can be revised at any time. And that's really the key to why we wanted to talk also is TIF seems to always be on the chopping block. We love TIF. I think if you utilize TIF the way that TIF is supposed to be utilized, it shouldn't go away. I think that the 2012 changes, we all had to get on board with, but they've been good changes. I can't argue that they weren't good changes. But we do want to make sure that you understand, in the past, you've used TIF to pay for all of your debt service on most of your bonds. That may not be the case in the future. So it's just a conversation to kind of bring some of this information to light. We are always fighting to preserve TIF, but we never know what's going to come about there. The debt service levy always will allow you to plan for the types of projects, and we kind of talked about this, whether they're supported by TIF or other sources of revenue. So if you don't have, TIF availability for a project, a debt service levy is a very viable option that you should be looking at. And then project planning and borrowing allows you to lock in the construction costs. So we get a lot of questions from a lot of councils about pay-as-you-go projects and how that can result and what that can look like. I'm not saying that you can't pay as you go for some smaller projects, but some of your larger projects, it gets very, very difficult because you can't lock in that construction cost. If you're going to do a street and you're going to do it year by year by year, those construction costs could go up every single year on each new block, and it could get out of control for you instead of just locking it in at one time and then again borrowing and paying for that. What happens is when you do pay as you go, and we've seen a multitude of cities that do it, if you only do pay as you go, it results in less projects over time. And if it's important for you to get your projects done and completed, then pay as you go is probably not the best option for all of your projects to be completed. So a whole lot of information, but really just to start some discussion as you talk about capital improvements, as you start to talk about budgeting and kind of what things look like. These are just some discussions that we've been having with your administration.
Appreciate it. There is a lot of information there, but we have several options that the council can consider during the budget process and when bonding. And that's, we wanted to kind of dive into this a little bit tonight, give you some food for thought as we go forward. There are multiple options, and we can do this in bite-sized chunks. You don't have to do it all at once. We can for example, the TIF admin fees, I'm putting calculations together now on where we can utilize TIF admin fees. What that does is that takes those costs out of the general fund, and we utilize TIF for those admin costs. Those are something that are easier to put back in should we lose TIF or the legislation this last year and expected to come this next year would remove our pre-98 TIFs, which don't expire, and they would start to expire going forward. So we would lose that constant source of revenue. But we have multiple options that we can pursue in ways that we can offset costs. Residents won't necessarily see an increase, but at the end of the day, we'll get more bang for our buck by starting to think about how we fund our projects a little bit differently.
A lot of information, I understand, so, but please feel free to reach out to your administration if you have questions. We'll continue to have conversations and answer any of the questions that you've got. We kind of put this together as a collaborative conversation that we've been having, and just wanted to kind of get some information in front of you and be able to prove up where that savings can be. We know that that's very important, is to prove up where that savings can be. And again, you would not be the only city considering using your ARPA funds on a very large water and sewer project, water or sewer project. The majority of cities that we're talking to, especially that are under SRF programs right now, doing SRF projects, are planning to use those ARPA funds for those types of projects, just to help buy down that debt service levy a little bit. It just gives them a little bit more cushion, they say, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The only
Thank you,
comment
Maggie.
I gotta make, you kept commenting about the county being the big loser. Actually, counties borrow money to pay their day-to-day bills, to pay their payroll, which then excludes them from TIF dollars.
Yeah, if they have a debt service levy,
I know
that's right.
Quite a few of them.
Yeah, if they have a debt service levy, that's correct. And again, there's your bang for your buck right there, so.
All righty.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you all very much.
Anybody have any questions, comments? Okay, we'll go to item number 2, which is to consider approving the fiscal year 2021 street finance report.
And, I'm sorry.
Any questions on it? It's pretty straightforward.
And just briefly, this allows us to collect road use tax. If this isn't submitted on an annual basis, we don't collect road use tax. And so that's one of the main reasons that this is done, in addition to the state requirement, obviously. But this is not submitted, we don't receive road use, and we're going to receive additional road use, so we want to get this submitted as soon as possible.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 3, now we'll get into the fun part. Is to consider second reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to elections.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Did you call your name, Andrew? Did you call me? Yep. Okay. All right, motion carried. Kelly's getting too fast for me.
sorry.
Item number 4 is consider resolution waiving final reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to elections.
So moved. Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Did we receive any comments whatsoever
No,
on any of these?
no, none on, none of them.
Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 5 is consider second reading an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to interference with official acts.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion with support. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 6 is consider resolution waiving the final reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to interference with official acts.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Any comments on this one?
none of them.
Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 7 is consider second reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to alcoholic beverage control.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 8 is consider resolution waiving final reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to alcoholic beverage control.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Same question. Did we receive any public comments? All right. Roll call.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 9 is consider second reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to abandoned vehicles.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 10 is consider resolution waiving final reading of an ordinance amending provisions pertaining to abandoned vehicles.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Same question. Did we receive any written comments, verbal comments?
no.
Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 11 is consider second reading of an ordinance amending new provisions pertaining to failure to assist.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 12 is consider resolution waiving final reading of an ordinance amending new provisions pertaining to the failure to assist.
Motion. Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Receive any
No.
written or verbal comments? Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 13 is consider setting second reading of an ordinance adding new provisions pertaining to low-speed electric bicycles.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 14 is consider resolution waiving final reading of an ordinance adding new provisions pertaining to low-speed electric bicycles.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Any written or verbal comments?
no.
Roll call.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 15 is considered a second reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 162 of the City of Code related to floodplain management.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 16 is consider resolution waiving the final reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 162 of the City Code related to floodplain management.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Same question. Receive any written comments, verbal comments? Yeah. Roll call.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 17 is consider partial payment for pay request number 4 from Thomas Backhoe for work completed on South Lift Station replacement project in the amount of $218,500.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 18 is consider payment Snyder Associates for engineering service performed on construction of the Gear Avenue Trail in the amount of $2,815.02.
So moved.
Support.
The motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 19 is considered change order number 2 from Thomas Backhoe Service for the South Lift Station replacement project in the amount of $11,966.67.
Motion to support.
Young,
Aye.
oh wait,
Didn't get a second.
I didn't
Haven't got a
you.
second yet.
All right.
I'll second.
There's a motion with
Sorry, that
support.
was
Any discussion? Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 20 is consider right-of-way permit for Mediapolis Telephone Company to install infrastructure along North Gear, Mount Pleasant, and Washington Road. It's a 3-year permit. They're putting in approximately 13,236 feet of fiber, and that cost will be $3,309.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young,
Aye.
Motion carried. Old business, item number 1 is to consider amending the application for State of Iowa Revitalize Iowa Sound Economy, which is the RISE funds for a new roadway in the West Burlington Industrial Park. After having lengthy discussions here in the last week, I think we just not act on this, and we can come back, bring it back sometime when there's other available funds available to the city to use to get some of this RISE money.
So, just real quick, we've had some conversations, there's some potential additional revenue sources, and basically, because this is not tied to jobs any longer, this is a local development RISE grant, so it's not tied to jobs, it's tied to development. And basically, DOT checks in with you every year to make sure that you haven't done something inconsistent with RISE funding. Basically, it has to be industrial development. And it's over, they'll be checking in over a 10, 20-year period. It's not tied to jobs at all. Because with the loss of the immediate opportunity grant funds, it was a $205,000 in additional funding. There doesn't appear to be any real urgency in moving forward with the application at this point in time. We've asked the question of how long we can keep this in the pipeline rather than reapplying, but it's very simple to reapply. You can reapply in February and in February 1 or September 1. So in our discussions, council can certainly choose to proceed with the application as it is and have it on DOT's December's meeting, and there's a good chance that the funding would be approved. It's my recommendation that we hold off at this point in time, continue those discussions. I see if we can identify some additional funding, because there really is no rush at this point. It's not tied to jobs any longer, and there are a couple potential sources that we need to follow up on additionally to bring back additional information. In the meantime, another project could come about. You could utilize tax increment financing through a rebate program to help fund, or not necessarily a rebate, excuse me, but to help fund that infrastructure, because you would have increment at that point in time. So I think we have the opportunity to look at additional funding sources, additional partnerships, maybe a TIF project, and there's no rush. And so if we could find additional funding or partners, it's a win-win for everybody, and there's, why not wait at this point in time? And that'd be my recommendation. Council can certainly choose to proceed with the grant at this point in time, understanding that those costs to the city alone going forward after the grant dollars would be about $559,466,000 after $205,000 addition. So.
Need a motion to table this?
You don't need a table,
If council's good, we'll see what DOT says. If we can leave it hanging out there, fine, we'll leave it hanging out there. If not, we'll just tell them that we'll bring it back at one of their application periods, either in February 1 or September 1.
I kind of think we should make it known that, and I've been pretty vocal of the one questioning this, that I think we as a whole are in favor of developing that area and building the infrastructure out there, but developing a more comprehensive plan for doing so, not just this one bit of road for this one opportunity. So I hope whoever is interested in developing this doesn't see this as we're not willing. I think we just want to put the whole plan in place and get more funding sources.
Absolutely, address the utility issues that we have outstanding at the same time. Absolutely in favor of economic development, appropriate development for the site. And, you know, if there are partnerships. So, no, absolutely not. That has nothing, that's really nothing to do with it. The jobs went off the table at this point in time. So, you know, there's no reason to wait from my perspective. We're still strongly in favor of development, absolutely, 100%.
I think if you look around the community, you can see how much we've developed with, in partnership with other people, so that doesn't pan into this, I don't think.
I think what this responsibility puts back on us, though, is to come up with a real plan, a thought-out plan for that area, and how we're planning to market it and develop it. I agree with you, we're rushing too fast to get this done with not a strong forethought and not a strong plan in place. So I concur with us putting it on hold, not moving forward with it, but on ourselves. What is our plan out there and how do we plan it?
And I really see that as working with the chamber and economic development folks, working with regional planning and the city and coming up with a plan. And in this very short term, addressing the utility and the force maintenance specifically, so.
Okay. Anyone wishing to address the council on matters that are not on the agenda tonight? We do have a closed session scheduled, and council can consider going into closed session in accordance with Iowa Code Chapter 21.5, Section 1, Paragraph J, to discuss the purchase of particular real estate, only where premature disclosure would be reasonable, expected to increase the price the government body would have to pay for that property. I would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
A motion to go into closed session. Or
indicate that you may have a conflict of interest and not attend the meeting.
Okay. Okay, that works.
Okay. Roll call.
Crowner,
Aye.
Lees,
Aye.
Young.
aye.
Okay. We'll head into that room for a few minutes. It shouldn't take very long. And